It seems like detachment is the new buzzword in personal development, and I see it everywhere. And I feel like the most important aspect is never talked about. Because very often people talk about detachment in terms of detach from a romantic interest that isn't giving you the affection you want, or detach from what society expects of you, detach from what your work situation demands of you when it isn't in alignment with who you want to be. And then there are those generic advices like, for women particularly, go and like get into your soft girl era and like start working out and do like Pilates and drink your, matcha tea, or I don't know what it was. And then like for guys, it's like work out, start your business, hustle, like those typical things that at the end of the day aren't really going to make a difference one way or another. If you think about it, most people are not doing those things because the motivation is lacking. Because if you're doing something in order to get some, revenge situation, it's not going to make you feel complete either. And that's why most people don't do it. And I've seen many people talk about it. It's like the next big thing. But at the end of the day, if we're not able to attach ourselves to a new version of ourselves, to build our own identity, we will never be motivated enough. Because if you're detaching in order to prove something, in order to get some kind of revenge, in order to level up in comparison to somebody, or to say, I'm better than my job, or I'm better than that person, it is not going to give you long-term satisfaction. But of course, detachment is incredibly important if you do it right. I just believe we have to focus more on the attachment part, meaning if you tell somebody, stop thinking about the pink elephant, what you're going to do, you're going to think about the pink elephant. What most people don't talk about is that you actively have to think about the yellow rabbit. So today we're talking about what that yellow rabbit actually is. So you have that identity shift. So you know that the thing that you're most attached to is your own growth in a healthy way, in a way that makes you feel like you're being you, where you don't need to hustle, where you don't have to prove anything to anybody. It is about becoming more of who you are and being anchored into that one version of yourself that is not up for debate. Before we get started, I want to remind you, if you haven't done this so far, to download the free poster on the 5 pillars to an epic life. And if you want to take it to the next level, join the hundreds of INFJs in our INFJ Epic Life Bootcamp. Our next live call is this Saturday, August 30th, and we're going to tackle INFJ prosperity. Everything you need to know in order to join us, you can find through the links in the description. I believe most people think that they're detached. I thought of myself for the longest time that I'm detached because I wasn't playing into some norm that it seemed like I had to play by. But if you're somebody like me who's able to be a chameleon, if you're somebody who can be one version of yourself when you're with person A and then another version when you're with person B, there's still an attachment. There's an attachment to playing that role in somebody else's life. There's this attachment to, I have to be a certain way in order to be accepted. And for me, that meant I have to be of service to the people around me. I have to show up in a way that is beneficial to them first and foremost in order for them to want to be around me. Because me choosing me and me being selfish and me attaching to my personal growth isn't going to matter to anybody. Everybody is hyper-focused on themselves, right? So if you say, I'm going to choose a future that is beneficial for me first, who's really going to want to hang out with me? Like, why would people like me if I'm choosing me and if I'm not doing what is beneficial to others? That's how it felt to me. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. And so it isn't this obvious thing of, okay, I'm attached to a certain person, or I'm the person who's, constantly stalking somebody, or who needs my boss's approval. It doesn't have to be so obvious in order for you to know that you're still attached to a version of yourself that is too moldable, that is too flexible. And what I mean with too flexible is that there isn't this core of you that is not up for debate. That was the biggest change I had to make. I had to decide that no matter who comes into my life and no matter who's already in my life, there's a version of me that I'm not going to shake off, something that I commit to. And it seems very hard if you're just thinking of external accolades. So if you think about it, okay, I'm just going to go out and look for a relationship. If you think in terms of, I need to optimize my friendships, I need to improve my living situation, I'm going to go for a better job. if it isn't something that's going to change your identity in a way that makes you more aligned to who you are. So the way you want to see yourself internally is being represented on the outside. If that connection is not being made, you're never going to be motivated enough. And so that's why I always say when you want to detach, we have to actually start focusing on attaching and attaching to something that is beneficial, on something that you can commit to for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you can't change it a little bit, but that it's something that you know from now on, I'm not going to budge on this. So that is one of the reasons why in bootcamp, for example, we talk about archetypes, because archetypes are, of course, just a representation of things we can take into consideration. It's not like you're always this one archetype. But for me, I've always been drawn more to the archetype of a priestess than a queen. I've always been more of the warrior than the soldier. I like to do things on my own. I don't like people telling me what to do. And I also don't like to be the leader in a way a queen is a leader. And those are things that I just know about myself. And yeah, maybe a little bit will change, but generally speaking, that's who I am. And there are people in my life who have never seen me this way because it would have challenged their way of going through life. It would have challenged the way they see themselves. It would have challenged the way they see themselves in comparison to me. And because of that, so many people, me included, chose to hide those aspects. But if you look in terms of archetypes, and you can look it up wherever you want to look it up, there's so many examples of spiritual archetypes. For example, you can look into fictional roles. It doesn't matter. Whatever kind of figure kind of speaks to you that you feel like is part of something that you would want to embody, but it's not something that you live out yet, lean into that, attach to that. So that's what I'm saying. We're going to focus on the yellow rabbit. And yes, it is not enough for you to just think about it. So I've always been drawn to Wonder Woman. When I was, in my early 20s, I was really a lot into Lil Kim. Doesn't mean I'm going to Comic-Con and dressing up as Wonder Woman all the time. It also doesn't mean that I'm going to be a female rapper. None of that. There was just something about that energy that I loved. It was the colorfulness. It was the part of I want to help other people, like in the case of Wonder Woman, and feel strong at the same time and feel feminine. So there's so many aspects that just spoke to me. And I think it's important to embrace those and to see like, how can I use that energy to expand my life? So what am I doing here? Like, I created this channel that has nothing to do with either being like, a rapper, a musician, some kind of superhero, nothing like this. But this is more of a representation of who I am than my former job as, a consultant in banking. That's just the fact. And I'm not saying you have to quit your job. I'm not saying you have to start a hobby like this, but think of qualities of yourself that are actually so vital to who you are that you keep hidden, that nobody barely ever sees. Sometimes we meet a person and we feel like with that person, I can be all that I want to be. That person is able to make space for that version of me. But if you are in situations like this, I promise you that is not your solution. Very seldomly, this is the solution to us, because if we don't have another outlet, we're always going to be willing to make compromises that are not healthy for us. What we want is to attach to that version of ourselves in such a way that no matter who comes into your life, this is not up for debate. And even if you had to choose, you would do it all alone. You would be okay with having just acquaintances further away, but you're not going to give up who you actually are. And as long as you have those ideas of who you could be and who you feel most comfortable as, who you would be proud of, if you only have those versions of yourself in your mind, then people can project onto you whatever they want. And it's way easier in those situations to actually then attach to other people's judgments of you, that we think whatever they say about us is going to make a difference of if we feel we're good people, if we think we're worthy, and so on. But if you anchor in who you are in a way that's tangible, everything changes. So there are two aspects here. The first one is it's not enough to just detach. We actively have to attach. Remember, if you want to stop thinking about the pink elephant, because thinking about the pink elephant has always caused you trouble, right? There's this typical thing of I need to detach from what that person is thinking of me, or what society thinks of me, or what my boss thinks of me, because being at the mercy of what people think of me is making me miserable. Then the next active step is to say, I actively have to attach myself to something. I actively have to do something. I have to not only think about the yellow rabbit, I have to make the yellow rabbit my reality. So that's the first thing. It's not enough to detach. We actually have to attach. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Our mind doesn't work with negatives. Actively thinking about something, so working towards something, is the best way to actually make something else less important in your mind. So sometimes if we are in an unhealthy, toxic relationship, for example, it still makes us feel alive. If everything else, feels sort of boring. So the way you actually remove power from that relationship is not by telling yourself that relationship doesn't matter. It doesn't work. If that's the thing that makes you feel most alive, you can't tell yourself that story. What works, though, is to create something new that makes you feel more alive and makes you feel more secure at the same time, because you are the one who's creating it. So that is the first aspect, the attachment part. And the second part, and this is incredibly important for people like me who are, introverts, who are INFJs, who are intuitives, to know that it's not enough to just think about it. It's not enough to kind of like change your internal concept about it, because our reality still mirrors back to us who we are. You can hold on to that version of yourself that you know is your true core. But if every person that you interact with, if the job you're doing every day, if the choices that you make are a representation of somebody that you don't want to be, and you're always being reflected back that version of yourself, it's going to be that much harder to hold on to that version of yourself that makes you feel good. So what do we have to do? We have to actively take actions in the real world that will help us to anchor in the person we want to be. So if I create and post a YouTube video, this is an externally observable fact. Me working on internal concepts is not that. Me going for a better job is a difference. Me moving to an apartment that actually is more in an environment that makes me feel good. So if you're somebody who doesn't like the city, moving to a more rural area, that is really a choice that you're making that's going to help you to be more around people, environments, and just situations that represent the kind of life you want to live. This is not about proving your worth to somebody. It's not about, coming out on top. It's about, if you would look at your life, if you would look at you from the outside, would you say, that's a person that I would like to get to know? That's a person that I'm proud of. That's a person who, from my perspective, is living an epic life. Because I promise you, my interpretation of an epic life is different than yours. But I know I'm living it. And I know that I'm living it the moment I started living it, and not the moment I had achieved all of those things in the real world. But still, the way I started it was, I started writing the ebook, I started creating videos, I went for the better job, I, started putting effort into creating an environment that made me feel good. I accepted where my reality currently was. I accepted all those things I didn't like, started being appreciative of what I already have, and then started expanding upon it in a way that is more and more representation of who I want to be. There is no right or wrong here. But the entire concept of detaching doesn't work if the only strategies you have are working out, eating right, buying myself flowers, or joining some group. If it's not in alignment with who you want to be, just a little bit more than it was last year, because, this is not a all or nothing kind of game. It's always a leaning into part. If you don't have the goal of being somebody who loves their life, you're always going to fall back into some kind of different attachment to something that isn't healthy for you. What I always like to say when it comes to building that identity and attaching to that version of yourself that is not up for debate is that we want to improve upon what we currently have. Our image of how life could be is our North Star, and it should be something that we can take into consideration. It's something that can guide us, but it's not that we're failing if we're not living that kind of life. What we can do is to say, look at everything I've achieved so far. And you can always look at it from a positive perspective, and you can always look at it from a negative perspective. And I encourage you to do both, to kind of like grieve everything that you've missed out on, maybe to grieve all the things that you're willing to give up on, and then to say, well, this is my life. How can I make it better moving forward? How can I make it better from my perspective? It's not that your life will become more worthy. It's not that you as a person will become more valuable, because you by existing just have value. And that is not something that somebody else can either deny or confirm. This is just an understanding of life. If I want to live my life in a way that makes me feel fulfilled, then I have to start appreciating every single day that I have, and I have to expand upon everything that I've already been able to create for myself. And when you do that, you really start anchoring in who you are into your current reality. And that is really a tangible thing. So think of it in terms of externally observable facts. You being over somebody is not an externally observable fact. You being more confident in some kind of capacity, not an externally observable fact. This might be something true and internal, but it's not anchored in. The more you anchor in, meaning your environment is mirroring back to you who you are, the more you have those situations, the easier it is to hold on to that version of yourself. Do you know how much energy it takes to hold on to the version of yourself when your entire environment is telling you something different? So it is way easier for me now to hold on to my identity than it was when I was in a corporate job and nobody wanted me to be the way I am. It's way easier for me to hold on to that version of myself that I like now that I'm married to my husband, now that I have my kids, than when I was in some toxic situationship where the other person didn't accept me for who I was. It's just a fact. No matter how strong we are, no matter how much we can hold on to that core, it is always easier to have an environment that mirrors back who you are, and you can always create more of that. This is not about an all or nothing situation. So I wanted to have my own business for the longest time. I wanted to work by myself. I wanted to have the freedom that I have now. But that didn't mean that I quit my job at the first moment I started doing this. No, I actually went to a more demanding job because it also provided me more opportunities, more income, just more ways for me to grow while I was building this. Because I knew that if I'm only thinking of this is my dream, and if I'm not getting my dream, I have failed, I will always be stuck in this position. But if I think in terms of how can I attach who I am more into reality, even if it's just 1% a week, if you add those percentages up, your life will look completely different in only a year. And that's what's going to happen if you finally say, I'm going to commit to creating my epic life. I'm not only going to mentally start focusing on the yellow rabbit. No, I'm going to create a reality that more and more mirrors back to me the version of myself that I like to see. And the more you do this, the easier life will be. Because if you're living a life that is not the way you want it to, it takes so much energy to maintain that. Think about how much more energy you would have if your life would be in flow. If you didn't have to constantly work against the grain. If you didn't have to constantly prove who you are because people are trying to put you in a box. At some point, they just can't. So they vanish out of your life. And this is what we want. People either grow or they're supposed to leave your life. Maybe they will leave your life and then come back once they've grown. But it's not taking precious energy of you to constantly have to fight against people and situations who want to make you into something that you're not. And that's why we have to actively create the life that we want. That's why we have to attach to the version of ourselves that is not up for debate, and we have to anchor it into reality, not just think about it. Remember, if you want some more guidelines how to get that whole process started, get the poster on the 5 pillars to an epic life. And if you want to take it to the next level, then join the hundreds of INFJs who are doing this process together. It's lifetime access. So once you're in it, you can grow with us. You're in the environment. There's so many video lessons and materials, and we have those monthly live calls. So the next one is this Saturday, August 30th. We're going to talk about INFJ prosperity. So if you feel like you're ready to take that next step and join us in creating your version of an INFJ epic life. Now is the perfect opportunity. Everything you need to know you can find through links in the description. And if you want to watch another video now that is in line with today's topic, then check out the video you see on the screen right now. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.